Let's talk about the first 100 days of Pope Leo XIV.
Yeah, it certainly has been a nice change of tone and aesthetics. I guess I'm still kind of uncertain as to whether or not it's the prelude to something really great coming, or if we're just in the eye of the storm right now, so to speak.
Yeah.
My root question or my root concern remains, and it goes back to the address that he gave to the College of Cardinals on May 10th. I think it was day 3 of his pontificate.
Pope Leo XIV puts a stop to the Pachamama. I mean, there needs to be acts of reparation made in those gardens, but
They will define his pontificate in some ways, will be, who heads the doctrinal office, the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, who heads the dicastery for worship.
that he intends to correct the errors just subtly and slowly. Let's talk about the SSPX.
What exactly does the SSPX need to do in order to meet that canonical criteria?
By the way, my name is Joe McClane. I host a radio program called A Catholic Take, where we look at the world through a Catholic lens. I'd love for you to hang out with us. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Praise be to God in all things. I'm going to be linking to a series of articles today for you over in the show notes, one of which is a 100 Days of Leo XIV by Rate Cheli blog. There's also a Pillar article on his potential curial appointments. It's all speculation at this point, but it's an interesting and detailed article. Plus, I've got this new article. Leo XIV puts a stop to the Pachamama. Nature must neither be idolized nor endured as slaves. I love that article. It's a great article. I'm going to put a link to that. Plus, there's an article out of the Swedish cardinal clarifying the SSPX status. But joining us to talk about all of this and much, much more is the host of the Veritatis Vox podcast, Matt Gaspers. Matt, welcome to the show. Good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Joe. It's good to be back as always.
Praise be to God. Let's talk about the first 100 days of Pope Leo XIV. I got to say, the one thing I do like is a restoring of calmness from the huge upheaval of the last 12, 13 years, restoring a bit of the dignity of the office of the pontificate. How do you see that from that perspective?
Yeah, it certainly has been a nice change of tone and aesthetics. I guess I'm still kind of uncertain as to whether or not it's the prelude to something really great coming, or if we're just in the eye of the storm right now, so to speak.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, somebody posted on X the other day that they saw great things coming. They said, "Mark my words, he's going to do these great things." And I responded by saying, I want to believe. I do.
Right.
I want to be on that team. But every day that goes by, I fear that the chances of that happening are actually going down and not up. But I mean, I want to be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong. I'd be so grateful to say I was so wrong about that. I'm just not sure that it's gonna come out that way. There's some good. There's some we're not so sure, right?
Well, you mentioned the Rorate Cheli article, which you sent to me, and I read that last night. And what really stuck out to me is the following from that article. The author says, "Prevost is not Bergoglio," and I do agree with that in several ways, like certainly personality-wise and maybe liturgical taste-wise. So it says, "Prevost is not Bergoglio, and of course he is not the anti-Bergoglio either," which I also think is true, and I'll explain in a moment. At the same time, Leo XIV seems inclined to take up some issues dear to Francis, from the ecological question to migrants to synodality. I did a show on my channel about the synodality issue with Michael Hines from LifeSite. I know you have him on occasionally. This article goes on, but the antiphon at least suggests or gives us hope, ! That he could also recalculate these issues like a navigator in a more Christocentric direction. That's also an article I've heard, or an argument rather, that I've heard other people make, without turning them into mantras and repositioning them in a different light from the predominantly socio-political, not to say ideological one, that increasingly characterized his predecessor's pontificate, end quote. But I guess my root question or my root concern remains, and it goes back to the address that he gave to the College of Cardinals on May 10th. I think it was day 3 of his pontificate, during which he said, "I would like us to renew together our complete commitment to the path that the Universal Church has now followed for decades in the wake of the Second Vatican Council." This is Pope Leo XIV, day 3 of his pontificate. He went on to say, Pope Francis masterfully and concretely set it forth in the Apostolic Exhortation Evangelii Gaudium. And then he highlighted several fundamental points from that document, which has some major problems with it, including on the issue of Francis didn't call it Christian Zionism, but it's clearly in there, that the old covenant is still valid and the Jews are still the chosen people and all of that kind of stuff. So that statement from Pope Leo still lingers in my mind and is very concerning to me.
Yeah, it's like I said at the beginning of the conversation, there's some unknown here that we're just not sure. And at this point, that's one of the issues too, is just the pure speculation of it all. We had hoped he'd come back from Castel Gandolfo, which was nice to see him go back to Castel Gandolfo. I thought that was great that he did that. Praise be to God. But we had hoped we would start to see some curial appointments, and we haven't received those yet. In fact, when I get into the Pillars article, the Pillar is also speculating. Everybody's just speculating at this point. That's all we have to go on. So take it with a huge grain of salt, right? But when the Pillar starts to speculate on which appointments are going to be looked at, and even the potential of who might be chosen for those appointments, I got to tell you, it didn't give me a lot of confidence. I didn't love a lot of the names that the Pillar is pointing out. I mean, Tobin is on that list. What? No, Tobin does not need a job. Tobin needs retirement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean the three main curial appointments that I think will be kind of they will define his pontificate in some ways, will be who heads the doctrinal office, the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, who heads the dicastery for worship, which is currently still being led by Cardinal Arthur Roach, the arch enemy of the traditional Latin Mass. And we should also say the DDF, the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, is still being led by Cardinal Fernandez, who is still claiming that fiducia supplicans is basically irreformable. As I understand it, that's what he's claiming, and it's here to stay, something to that effect. And then, on the temporal side of things, the Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, someone who, like Cardinal Joseph Tobin, was named by Archbishop Vigano in his original testimony in August of 2018 as being part of this so-called homosexual current in the Roman Curia. And I also read recently this article on Substack. I think I sent it to you by, who is this person? Mrs. Calloway.
Yeah,
I forget her full name, but
Beth Calloway.
Coming out in the Vatican, which is Beth Calloway, about basically a review of the research put into this book called In the Closet of the Vatican: Power, Homosexuality, and Hypocrisy. So that problem of clerical sodomy still seems to be a major issue in the Curia. And I don't know if Leo is the man who's going to actually deal with it in a definitive manner.
It kind of reminds me of something Father Charles Murrah often says. By the way, we should continue to pray for him. He had pneumonia recently. We tried to get him on the show, so we're going to continue to pray for his health. Hopefully he'll be back soon. Mm-hmm. But something he said it to me a number of times, because I just still scratch my head. I don't understand how all this works. Like, if you were to believe that article, which I will link to today as well, by Dr. Martel, and it's a few years old now. It's not new, this book. In the Closet of the Vatican: Power, Homosexuality, and Hypocrisy. It's an old book. It's a new article based on an old book. But nonetheless, it talks about 80%. It speculates up to 80% of the Curia is either tolerating homosexuals or participating in it. One of the two. And it's like
I've heard that same figure from. I've heard that same figure from other reliable, trustworthy sources, people I know who have inside knowledge. So
whatever the number is, it's high. I don't know what it is, but whatever that number is, it's high. I'm not sure Dr. Martel has the right number, but whatever it is, it's a high number. It's too high of a number. It's not tolerable, whatever the number is. But I would always ask Father Murr, how is this possible? Why don't they just clean the house? And he's like, that's not how it happens. The Vatican is such a bureaucracy, such a machine, that these popes, although they may be personally good men, they will not come in and just clean house. It's just not how business is conducted there. And from an outsider's perspective, that just seems absolutely bizarre. It feels like, the Pope wields the keys, does he not? Does he not have the power to clean this up? Why wouldn't they choose to clean these things up? Father Murr would even talk about how he thought, John the 23rd was a good man. Paul the Sixth, JP1, JP2, Benedict, they're good men, but they just weren't going to, sometimes the toilet needs cleaning and they weren't going to do it.
Well, I think it's called the Lavender Mafia for a reason. I think they're men who are very intent on continuing their lifestyle, to put it politely, and they don't want any interference. I mean, I think there would be some harsh repercussions potentially, and I also, based on the evidence that I've read about, I think, and Father Murr details, I think, some of this in his in one of his books, Murder in the 33rd Degree, that if you challenge those men, those power brokers in the Vatican, there could be lethal consequences, as there seem to have been for John Paul I. So,
Okay, so is Leo the kind of guy?
I'm not saying that's an excuse. I think they should be willing to do, but it's going to take a man who's willing to be who's willing to be a martyr in order to do what's necessary.
I think to some degree, the Pope, probably these popes, these men, they probably recognize this issue. Benedict obviously recognized this issue. He said as much on a couple of occasions towards the end of his pontificate. He talked about being surrounded by it all. Okay, great. But is he just so isolated? Is his power so removed that he can do nothing? And at the end of the day, that's one of my biggest fears for Leo XIV. I fear that I would love the guy, that if he were sitting here, I would really enjoy talking to him, that I would really appreciate him and have a great conversation with him. But I fear that he wouldn't have the courage to do the hard bit that needs to get done. Just like Benedict didn't have that. Just like JP2 didn't have that. Just like JP1, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At what point does that get done? Or is it just a matter of that we, like the Lord, have to endure all of this with grace and humility until the end?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose we'll find out in the coming years, because Leo's going to be with us, and
a long time,
presumably for quite a while. So I'm sure we'll find the answer to those questions. So that's kind of on the administrative side of things, but also, on the doctrinal side of things, as I said, I'm still concerned that I would still like to know, and I'm sure we'll find out over time, if there's a substantial difference when it comes to doctrine between Leo and Francis, because, there are indications that he is in some of the statements that he's made, and maybe we'll see what he chooses to write about in his first encyclical. But I don't know if there is a substantial difference between the two of them or not. And he's clearly a big fan of, as I quoted, the path that the church has been on since Vatican II. And that's also very concerning to me, because that path has led to the church's auto demolition, to quote Paul VI, so it's not a good path to continue on. We need to get back to the path of restoration and tradition, in my opinion.
Matt, welcome back. I want to just quote this statement he made yesterday. I like the headline from Solari here. It says, Leo XIV puts a stop to the Pachamama. I mean, I think that's a great headline. I would love to see that actually. I mean, there needs to be acts of reparation made in those gardens, but nonetheless, it says, he's quoting here, I'm quoting Leo here, no less evident is the right and duty to care for the home that God the Father has entrusted to us as attentive stewards, so that no one may irresponsibly destroy the natural goods that speak of the Creator's goodness and beauty, nor much less submit to them as a slave or a worshiper of nature, kind of like when they were bowing down to that piece of wood, the pagan idol Pachamama in the Vatican gardens. But it goes on, quote, it is not therefore a rejection of the care of creation, but rather a reminder not to confuse the plains, the Amazon rainforest, its rivers, the peoples who inhabit it. All are a part of a design that does not find its meaning in itself, but in Christ. in whom all things are brought together, Ephesians 1:10. In this light, Leo XIV urges the bishops of the Amazon never to lose sight of the primacy of proclaiming Jesus Christ, the only one capable of redeeming man from injustice and oppression. Wherever the name of Christ is preached, the telegram recalls, injustice recedes in proportion, close quote. And that's a great statement. Praise be to God. And I think it just illustrates what we're talking about in the last segment about that. Like, he's doing some things really well, and I'm very encouraged by. I find very hopeful, moving in the right direction. It's slower than I'd like, but still moving in that direction. And then to your point, other things, we're still we're just not sure. We're just not sure. Is it a case that he intends to correct the errors of the Francis pontificate just subtly and slowly?
Yeah, which I really don't think is adequate. And Bishop Athanasius Schneider has spoken to this issue before as well. And I think I asked him about this when I had him on my podcast back in May, just a few days after the election of Leo XIV. And he said it on other podcasts that the Pope needs to issue formal corrections of his predecessor's grievous errors. I mean, we can call them heresies, even if, Pope Francis was not a formal heretic. What some of the things that he said are, objectively speaking, heretical, and they have to be corrected specifically, explicitly, formally. It's not enough to have these little implications or innuendos. That's not gonna cut it. And also, I did a podcast on my channel, Veritatis Vox, with my friend Ryan Grant, who's a publisher at Mediatrix Press. He does a lot of translations of Bellarmine and other great doctors and saints of the church. And the name of the podcast is Quo Vadis Leo? ? A sober assessment. And in that podcast, Ryan presented an article. I forget the name of it, but it shows evidence that Leo himself has said we need more priests like Pope Francis. So again, it's so hard to know with Leo. There are positive indications, but then there are also concerning things. Sure, and yeah. I think it's just going to take time to get to the bottom of it, I guess. Personally, to connect this discussion with your previous segment with our mutual friend, Jason Jones, LifeSite reprinted recently an excellent article written by Dr. Matthew Sakanikis, who teaches at Christendom College. And it says, Pope Leo needs to reaffirm that the church is the true Israel of God. Amen. In my opinion, that is becoming one of the defining issues of our times, this issue of the Christian Zionist heresy. And it needs to be addressed in a magisterial manner by the Pope and the bishops. That is a very pressing matter, not only because of its spiritual dangers, but also, as Jason has described, it's terrorizing and decimating the people of Gaza, and it needs to stop.
Yeah,
Christians need to stop supporting this heresy.
Amen. Matthew Sakanikis is going to be back on the show tomorrow, as a matter of fact, to follow up on the conversation we had with him. I think it was a week before last, praise be to God. And I would agree. Wouldn't it be amazing to see that in his encyclical, which we don't even know what's going to be in the encyclical at this point. We're still all speculating. What will he write for his first encyclical? I doubt it's going to be that, but boy, would it be amazing if it was that, especially given that there was an article I'm linking to today as well. Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem says Satan wants to rule where Jesus lived. I just ruminate on that. Take that in for a moment. Let that just settle in your mind that the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Pizzaballa, is saying that Satan wants to rule there. And that's why we're seeing what we're seeing there. That's an incredibly strong statement from the Patriarch of Jerusalem, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, which is part of the reason why I was rooting for him to come out on that logia from the conclave. But yes, God's will be done in all things. Before we run out of time, though, I do want to get to the SSPX. They're back in the news right now. The Swedish Cardinal clarifies Society of St. Pius X status after unauthorized visit. We're linking to that in the show notes today. So let's talk about the SSPX. They're being listed as a part of the official Jubilee in Rome. That's not the first time that's happened. Praise be to God. I think the last Jubilee, they were also listed. So this is good news. This is a good step for trying to find ways to reconcile the society with the church, wouldn't you say? But the Swedish bishop's not happy.
Yeah, there's something going on where Bishop Fillet was performing Episcopal functions in his diocese, and he got a bee in his bonnet about that or something like that. But I mean, my question for the Cardinal and just for anyone who is opposed adamantly to the Society of St. Pius X, what exactly do they need to do in order to be in what people, including popes, have said full communion? I think I discussed this in an article that you interviewed me about a couple years ago when I provided some exclusive details from the Archdiocese of Kansas City. They commented on the SSPX in light of the Immaculata Church consecration ceremony back in May of 2023. And I end that article by asking, what are Catholics to make of the familiar claim repeated by the Archdiocese of Kansas City that the SSPX are not currently in full communion with the Catholic Church? Because according to the current Code of Canon Law, 1983, here's what it says regarding communion. Those baptized are fully in the communion of the Catholic Church on this earth, who are joined with Christ in its visible structure by the bonds of the profession of faith, the sacraments, and ecclesiastical governance. Well, the members of the SSPX clearly profess the same faith and share in the same sacraments as the Catholic Church. They're Catholics. They also have habitual faculties to absolve sins from Pope Francis, who likewise authorized local ordinaries the possibility to grant faculties to witness marriages, and really taking for granted that those same nuptial masses will be celebrated by an SSPX priest, so obviously it's okay for them to celebrate public masses by implication. So what exactly does the SSPX need to do in order to meet that canonical criteria for full communion that they don't already have? So in other words, why are they denied a canonical status in the church? I don't understand it.
Politics, probably, but it's the debate over Vatican II and the documents of Vatican II, I would say, is the primary driver, no?
I would assume so, but that's also confusing to me because, as I understand it, the society actually accepts the lion's share, the vast majority of what the Vatican II documents say. They have objections to a handful of things in the documents that are not even definitive, irreformable statements from the council. So what is the big deal? I guess I don't understand.
Well, they accept all dogmatic proclamations of Vatican II. How many were there again? One more time? I forget. Yeah, there was zero dogmatic proclamations.
Did you like that video? It's okay. You can admit it. It's perfectly fine. Hey, we cover the big stories of our day, from inside the church to outside the church to all points in between, and we do it from a Catholic perspective. It's called A Catholic Take. It's a radio program Monday through Friday. We live stream it right here on this channel, by the way, so make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We would be very grateful to you. And don't forget, you're going to want to watch this video right here because you don't want to miss anything.